Hi, it's Andre from the Woodstock years. Now, at Monterey 1967, Jimi Hendrix created a lot of word of mouth when he set fire to his guitar during Wild Thing. However, when it came to Woodstock, Jimi Hendrix wasn't the tipping point. He wasn't the person that made the Woodstock Festival go viral. But this led me on to a guy by the name of Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book called The Tipping Point. And this episode's all about what I discovered in The Tipping Point and how I got the blueprint for discovering who actually caused Woodstock to be viral. So more in a moment. Hi, it's Andre from the Woodstock years. So we know Jimi Hendrix didn't cause Woodstock to be viral. I mean, he was top of the bill. His manager, Mike Jeffries, made sure that he went on last, which meant they actually went on the Monday. It's supposed to be a 3-day festival, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but Jimi Hendrix went on Monday morning, and only about 40 to 50,000 people actually saw him there. Now, just put that in context. Michael Lang and the Woodstock Ventures guys, the guys who put on the festival, predicted about 50,000 people. And the only time that the Woodstock Festival actually got to that level was on the overflow day. So, in other words, if Jimi Hendrix had been, the big draw, then obviously a lot more people would have stayed. But people actually, the 500,000 started to go home. I guess they had jobs and things to go to. But this led me, while I was speaking to someone, and basically they said, well, Woodstock was a viral festival. And that got me thinking. And then I remembered a book that I'd read years ago by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book called The Tipping Point. Now, this was before YouTube and the whole viral thing, so I'm just going to explain a little bit about this book, which you can get from Amazon. I mean, it's a fantastic read if you like reading. I love reading. But basically what Malcolm said was, and he's a bit of a genius, I think, is that when an idea takes off, it often spreads like a virus. Now, he was talking about this in the year 2000, 20 years ago. This was way before YouTube, and we got this idea of going viral. And, spreading like a virus, we know that's what happens at school. Somebody coughs and sneezes, and then a few people have sniffles, and all of a sudden, if we're not careful, the whole school goes down with the flu. At least that's how it used to be when I was at school. But he talked about spreading of ideas, how it tends to be one or a few people, and he explicitly set out a few criteria. Number one, the person who is very influential knows or is known by a lot of people. Number two, that person knows a lot of stuff. But this third one was a really intriguing one. He said that the third criteria is that person might not be the centre of the action, if that makes sense. And he gives an example from American The Revolution. Now, stay with me, it's only going to be a short one, and I think this will just illustrate the point. He talks about a guy called Paul Revere. If you know anything about American history, one day a stable boy comes rushing to see Paul Revere, says how he's heard the British officers, now this is when America was part of the British Empire, and this boy says he's heard the British officers are saying that there's going to be hell to pay. And then Paul Revere jumps on his horse, and from midnight through to 5 a.m. he rides through a certain part of the states, warning people. And then when the British army come through, basically what happens is the American insurrection started, and that was the start of the Continental Army. And the point Malcolm Gladwell makes is that the reason that Paul Revere was successful was because he was known by a lot of people. He knew a lot about, troop movements and what was happening, even though he had no direct links with any of the American military. And the other example he gives is a guy by the name of William Dawes, who also, on the same day, sat on his horse and went through a different parts of America where he was trying to rally support. And this guy wasn't successful because he didn't know so many people and he wasn't so influential. So basically, to cut a long story short, what I got from this was my blueprint for whoever caused Woodstock to go viral. And we know it wasn't Jimi Hendrix, because if it was, 500,000 people would have stayed there to see him. And that would make sense if you think about, you usually go to see a concert for the top of the billing, but that didn't happen at Woodstock. But whoever did help make Woodstock viral, I now had my blueprint. It had to be somebody who knew a lot of people, who knew a lot of stuff, but was probably on the edge of the counterculture movement. So what that means is he probably wasn't a hippie. For all intents and purposes, the hippie movement will probably think of him as perhaps being a bit of a square. So I hope that all makes sense. Till next time, this is Andre from the Woodstock Years saying bye for now. The Woodstock Years, counting down to the 50th anniversary of 500,000 Strong.